Alright, since peeps were asking, I figured I would make a video about this and how to make flour dough wrapper for dumplings. Just all-purpose flour. And I usually use about 3 cups of all-purpose flour. So somewhere between a pound and 500 grams. So I really not measure it normally. So let's see. This is 1 cup. Yeah, so it ends up being something like 450 grams. It's not really an exact science. So the problem with dough wrappers is that the flour itself varies based on season, manufacturer, etc. The moisture content of the flour can change. So that makes it so that sometimes the right, like, 100 grams or whatever amount of water is correct, and sometimes it's not. So the trick is to actually try it out little by little, and I'll just show how to make this in a video. So that's the water, and I have about maybe like a cup of water, a little bit more. Basically, it's the container here, and the trick here is to add a little bit of water at a time. And you can try out how hard or soft you want your dough to be. So I could just a tiny bit of water. And you make a little bit of like a flour pile of flour like this. So in Chinese it's called 絮子. So it's like soft. So you can test it out and touch it and go like, oh, is this soft or hard enough? And then you put it on the side, a little bit more, and make a little bit more. You can do this by hand as well. So the point is kind of try it out and feel like, oh, this is just about the right softness or hardness for this chunk, and you put it aside. A little bit more. Aside, and you keep doing that until you have basically all the flour mixed in with water. So the problem with flour dough oftentimes is that you add too much water and then you have to add more flour, and then you add too much flour after and it's too dry, you have add more water, and the dough just gets bigger and bigger and you never reach the right consistency. But instead, you want to do a little bit at a time. Just pick out the pieces that you don't want, or just pick out the pieces that are too dry. A little bit more. Put it aside. So like, I never had really consistent dough until I tried this method. So my aunt told me to do this, and it actually worked out really well. So now every time I make dough for dumplings, it's always pretty consistent. It's like kind of moist and soft. Put it aside. Also, I think if you're pretty new to this and you've never made dough before, I would actually recommend making just a little, like, you know, take a day out and then make maybe like half a cup worth of flour so you don't waste it. And then you add a little bit of water, try this method, and make a smaller dough so you get a sense of how soft or hard the dough should be for it to be easy to make the wrapper with, to like knead the wrapper and stuff. Just keep going. So as you can see, like toward the end, it's starting to get a little bit more, a little bit trickier because you have less and less flour, so you have to be careful how much water you put in, otherwise your dough might get like way too wet. And then you might run out of flour, and then you have to add more flour, and then you continue the cycle of endless correcting of the consistency of the dough, and the dough just gets really big. So I still have some flour here, maybe a touch more water. So I think about here, we have just about enough dough and the flour. I'm gonna add a little bit more water later, but we'll see. So I would recommend a container that's like fairly flat on the bottom. Like this particular one this mixing bowl is pretty round on the bottom. It's like Western style mixing bowl. Actually making kneading flour a little bit more difficult. This is too dry here. Just add a touch more water. Yeah, I ran out of water, so maybe a little bit more. A tiny bit more. So you want to have enough bottom flat surface to work with. And combine the dough. This seems okay. I'm always afraid of the dough being a little too dry. This might be a touch wet. Get the dough in there. If it's too dry, it makes your dough very hard to work with later on. All right, I think we have just about the right amount to combine the dough together. So if it's a good dough, then it reaches the consistency where it's sticky and soft, but not too sticky. So when you knead, the goal is that you have clean hand, clean bowl, and clean dough, like smooth dough. So I think this is, see how just about the right consistency. So in Chinese, 是面干、手干、盆干。So sometimes I would find, because I'm short, so I would find a surface where I can put all my strength into it, like sort of a little bit lower. So I usually do it on the kitchen table or even on the floor. So I can squat down and knead. This is actually a pretty okay dough. It's a little sticky. I think that's okay. Because later on, when you're actually making dumplings, your dough will like dry in the middle of you working with it if you're not fast. So a little extra moisture wouldn't hurt. You just don't want to be so soft that it doesn't hold its shape. So this is actually pretty good. So as you can see, my hands are relatively clean, no huge chunks. The bowl is relatively clean as well. The surface of the dough is sticky and moist, like this. And it looks ugly right now. It's supposed to. So this needs to rest. Once the gluten integrates, this will be really smooth and beautiful. Right now it's not very smooth, and I don't really care because I mean, I can knead it for another half an hour, but it's not worth it. So like once it combines, just leave it to rest about an hour. And sometimes I do this, like, yeah, about an hour, 40 minutes to an hour. Just basically until the moisture penetrates all the gluten and the gluten start to integrate. And then you can knead it again. And if it's not smooth, you can wait for a little bit longer. If it's smooth, then you're good to go. So I'm gonna go ahead and cover this up with like some saran wrap. So I usually don't use saran wrap because I think it's kind of not great for the environment. But in this particular case, saran wrap, make sure that there's no air in between so that the moisture doesn't escape. So technically, you can just cover it up with like a tight bowl. All the plates in my house are square, so it doesn't fit into the round bowl, so I can't quite do that. Like if you have just like the right bowl to cover it up so there's not much space in between your flour dough and your bowl, that would also work as well. My mom just uses like a round lid. I can probably just do that as well. But saran wrap seems to have worked pretty okay so far. So we'll leave that to rest for an hour. So the filling is called Xian, aka 3 delights, I guess. And the 3 delights are mushrooms, pork, and shrimp. So the mushrooms to use is shiitake mushroom and Chinese woodier mushrooms. So woodier mushrooms, these soak up to be really quite a bit. So maybe like about this much. Less or more, it doesn't really matter that much. It's pretty eyeball-y. And then dried shrimp. This is a large bag of 100 grams. So I'm gonna use about maybe half of the bag, something like that. Not edible. I feel like yesterday was just okay. Maybe a little bit less than half a bag. So I'm going to use about a pound of pork with all the other ingredients. And it might end up that there's more filling than flour, or more flour than filling. Yesterday I had more filling than flour, so I had to make extra flour. So this, and the woodier mushroom I already soaked. Usually this takes about, I would say, 3 hours, something like that, to soak. So you want to soak this stuff in the morning. The Chinese woodier soaks fairly fast. You don't want it doesn't need to be soaked overnight. This can be soaked overnight. It probably would taste better if it does. And this can soak basically all day. So like if you want to make this in the evening, you need to soak your mushrooms, and then you need to soak your shrimp, dry shrimp, and then you also need to soak this. Mushroom, dry shrimp, you probably want to soak in the morning. This can probably soak in the afternoon, something like that. So I'm gonna go ahead. Right now I'm starting a little late, so I'm gonna just use hot water to soak this, and then cold or hot water to soak this, doesn't really matter. So if I start late, I use hot water. If I start early, I use cold water. Okay, so tip of the day here. For the shrimp, you actually want to save this juice that you use to soak the shrimp, dry shrimp with. I thought maybe add a couple more. So the reason is because this juice is very salty and it has a lot of glutamic acid. So it has a lot of basically flavor, lots of umami. So you want to keep this, and this juice needs to go into the meat later on. This can be discarded later, so it doesn't really matter how much water you use. And I'll leave this out for the time being. So the amount of mushroom that you use here, the woodier mushroom is fairly flavorless, so you don't have to worry too much if you put too much woodier mushroom. It's just mostly texture and very little flavor. The shiitake mushrooms has very strong flavor, so you don't want to use too many of these. Maybe for every pound of meat, if you have a large shiitake mushroom, like maybe 3 or 4. If small, maybe 5. So let me see. These were from yesterday. They soaked overnight. So these are really quite big. They're very plump. So maybe like 3 is probably enough. I might use up, yeah, I probably will use about 3, 3.5. This is like fairly small. So I might use like this one, maybe this one or something like that. You can always just kind of eyeball it. So I would say maybe this is like too much shiitake mushrooms, all 4 of them. So I might use 3.5, something like that. So I'll just leave this to soak. And one last thing. Ginger and green onions. All right, I'm back. So I ran out of green onions in the fridge. I had to go get some in the backyard. And I found golden raspberries. These are like weeds in the backyard. They're absolutely awful things. But for a couple months of the year, they do produce, so it's almost worth it. My backyard is like Wild West, survival of the fittest. So I grow these in the backyard. These are the Chinese chives. They're Chinese garlic chives. In Chinese, they're called 韭菜. You can get these at pretty much any Asian market, or Chinese Asian market specifically. No, I've seen them in Cookje and 99 Ranch. Most Chinese Asian market or Asian markets will have it. I don't think I've seen it in Japantown though, because I don't think Japanese people eat these. But this is a very, very strong flavored vegetable, and it adds a really nice layer of complexity. So it's called garlic chives because it really stinks like garlic. So if you, it takes a little bit getting used to. I think people who love it, like just absolutely love it, who hate it, just hate it. Usually, like yesterday I made it without the garlic chives and it just wasn't as good. It was missing a flavor. So you don't need too much of it. Maybe like, you know, I'm being pretty enthusiastic about it and I like maybe like a handful, something like this. And also some green onions. I'm gonna clean these and come back. All right, I'm back. And green onions. The Chinese garlic chives, these parts are little, tend to be like sort of what you want to remove, a little dry, so you want to get rid of that. Clean it, clean the leaves, pick out all the yellow pieces from the tip, like that. So if you get it from the store, normally these are in pretty good shape because they're greenhouse made, good stuff. But backyard ones, and a lot of times, you know, if it's like a batch that's a little bit sort of organic, get it from farmer's market, it might not be as perfect and trimmed. So this is kind of what you want. I'm gonna go ahead and cut that up. So you don't have to do this step this early, but so this is gonna be for the filling later. The reality is I probably shouldn't have done this now, but since I'm at it, may as well. The smell is really strong. Oof. Yeah, so if you have garlic chives in your diet, in your dinner, you don't want to go on a date after. Or for that matter, you probably don't want to burp around people in general because your burp will smell like garlic chives. It smells really bad. It tastes amazing, but boy, it smells strong. All right, so this is plenty. Put that in the container. I should probably put this in the fridge and use it later, because technically you're supposed to do this like right before you make the filling, especially for the veggies. The Napa cabbage specifically will produce a lot of moisture, and you don't need that much moisture. It makes your filling too liquidy. So you want to do sort of the Napa cabbage and all the veggie steps fairly late, like sort of the last things. You want to have everything else ready to be placed into the cabbage. So the trick of the filling is a balance between flavor, content, fat, and other moistures. And the quality of the dumpling is very much dependent on the texture and thickness of the wrapper, and also, of course, the flavor of the filling. So the filling part is a little tricky to get a good flavor. So that's why like some people's dumplings taste really, really good, and some people's dumplings just taste like slightly off. The difference is actually not that major. All right, so I'm gonna put that away. And we have green onions. So I'm gonna go ahead, just chop the green onions into very small pieces. So it's a pork filling, and pork tastes really good with green onions. So a generous portion of green onions never hurts. That said, this is a lot of green onions. I'm always surprised by how much green onions gets produced by cutting up a green onion. For some reason, it seems like once it's cut up, there's just more of it. All right, let's see. So this is quite a bit of green onions. As you can see. Yep, quite a bit. Another container. This dish uses up so many dishes. Dish uses up dishes. All right. So I'm gonna use maybe about half of this. Something like that. And then the other half, ginger. Found it. So I'm gonna scrape the skin off the ginger. At one point I had bought a thing that allows you to take small pieces of grapefruit out of a grapefruit. I never used it for that. This is like a citrus scooper. Just one of the million random pieces of useless things I bought. But this is actually very good for this one purpose, which is cleaning the skin off of ginger. Because I feel like cutting away like half of the ginger just because you don't like the look of the skin, it seems really wasteful. And this is actually really good for that, cleaning the skin off. I mean, I'm being fancy here. If I'm being lazy, I would just not bother. But the texture of the skin I guess like kind of shows up in dumplings, but not really if you cut it small enough. But it's slightly better if you clean the skin off. So maybe this much ginger. That's about how much ginger I used. More or less, doesn't hurt. Alright, and boop, boop. It's quite a bit of ginger. And then, oh, there's more on the back of the knife. Okay, I'll take all that and just take the opposite direction and chop it into very small pieces. I mean, you don't want to have like a big piece of ginger in your filling that you can chew on. Seems it will be, I mean, I love ginger, don't get me wrong, but it will be kind of unpleasant to eat that in a dumpling. So you want to cut it into very small pieces. At one point I was like lazy and I just did this with food processor, but food processor kind of doesn't quite get the size perfectly. So for things like ginger, onion, like these garnishing, like flavor type of things, you get a better result just cutting by hand. I feel like if you're a better cook, you'd be much faster in general. And if I'm in a hurry, I will be faster. But today I want to relax and make some dumplings. All right, so this combination here. So add hot water to this, or cold water if you want to soak it up for longer, just a little bit, so you have some liquid in there. All right, so I added some hot water. This basically makes kind of like a tea of ginger and green onion, and you want to use that water for your pork. You might add a little salt to that too. I feel like that's optional. But... all right. So that's all the ingredients here soaking. Did I miss anything? Oh, see how the wood ears are already quite a bit, and it's like the wood ear is ready and nothing else is, so not even the flour. All right, I think that's about it in terms of garnishing. Oh, of course, I'll come back with Napa cabbage, and we have to have Napa cabbage, about a head of Napa cabbage. So be right back. Okay, I'm back. So let's see how the flour dough is. Wee, sticky. So how I know that this flour dough is gonna be nice to work with. Pretty sticky right now. But you'll notice that it actually kind of like sticky, but it kind of peels off the saran wrap like that. So that means the gluten has been nicely developed. See, it kind of stays in that shape. Lift it up. Need it's so sticky, it like peels all the dry flour off the side of the bowl. Look at how like smooth that is. Just the dry flour got peeled off. Ugh. Sticky, sticky. So this flour is fairly soft, or or this dough is fairly soft is what I meant. It's like when you press down, it just stays in that shape for the most part. Okay, so that's pretty good. I'm gonna leave that nicely covered. Come back to it later. Right now, I'm going to make all the rest of the stuff. So I have cabbage almost ready. Let's clear off the cutting board. So basically all the rest of the ingredients I'm just going to, for the most part, hand chop / use a food processor. Like woodier mushroom actually works pretty okay in the food processor, so I'm just gonna do that. And I'm back. Okay, so I cleaned the cabbage. How much cabbage? Like this much. So basically, like I had a huge head of cabbage, maybe half of a head. That should be plenty. Yeah, if I need more, we'll see. I probably will need less, who knows. So yeah, the art of eyeballing. And that's how it goes with most Chinese recipes. You can probably find something online where it tells you how to make the filling, and it tells you like in grams how many grams that you need. But realistically, it's probably easier to just eyeball it. So I usually cut off the ends, just get rid of some of the parts that don't look so good. And I am going to food processor the shit out of it. So the thing about food processor and this particular dish is that I don't want, so the cabbage actually loses quite a bit of moisture, and it has a lot of moisture, as you can see. So I don't want the cabbage to be so runny that it causes the filling to be runny, to be too watery. So I can, by working with a food processor, I can actually get through this process of mixing everything up and chopping through the cabbage really fast. If I were to do this by hand, by the time I'm done cutting up all the cabbage, it's already lost a whole lot of moisture, a lot of water. And so it basically, you don't want it to lose too much moisture, but at the same time, you also don't want excess moisture there to make your filling too liquidy. So I'm gonna leave cabbage till the very end, basically. Because if you cut the cabbage and have it sit there, it'll just basically lose all its moisture content. And the moisture from the cabbage has like some flavor to it, so you don't want it to sit there, you know, pickling in salt and losing moisture the entire time. So just gonna cut up the shrimp first. I can use a food processor for the shrimp as well, but I've noticed that the dry shrimp, when it goes through the food processor, it gets shredded too much. It either doesn't get chopped up correctly or it gets shredded too much. And that affects the size of the pieces, and you don't want the shrimp to be shredded so much that you can't find like the chew anymore when you cook it. So you kind of still want the shrimps to be there. You don't want it to turn into like shrimp paste. So more shrimp doesn't hurt. I like shrimp, so I'm just gonna go all in on it. I think I might have put too much shrimp. I might have put like 2 pounds of meat worth of shrimp in there. I might leave some stuff out. We'll see how it goes. Yeah, I think maybe too much shrimp. Shrimpy. I think I can never say shrimp anymore without thinking about Forrest Gump. Shrimp. Dry shrimp, Chinese shrimp. Shrimp dumplings. Out of all the things that he said that's shrimp related, the only thing I wanted to have was shrimp dumplings. I don't think that was part of the line. So yeah, it's definitely a time-consuming dish. It's perfect for quarantine. Seems like everybody's making really time-consuming food. This is also why eating dumplings is kind of like a special occasion thing. Like New Year's, you have dumplings, the Chinese New Year's. It's also kind of a family activity because if everybody knows what they're doing, it's actually faster if everybody participates in the wrapping part, of course. The issue is that skills vary when it comes to wrapping, which means that the quality of the dumpling comes out varied as well. That makes the cook time a little tricky, because if one dumpling is like really huge and the other dumpling is like, you know, nothing but skin, then when everything gets cooked, neither one of the dumplings tastes right. But then again, the huge one probably will taste better than the one with just skin and no filling, so who knows. Okay, that's a lot of shrimp. Okay, I think maybe I'll just use this much and save the other stuff for maybe like a stir fry or soup or something. Okay, all right. Oh, my neck. So I did go through the food processor. So that's the wood eater mushroom. This actually works pretty well. Savable. Just put the shrimp in the mushroom together. And almost forgot the other mushroom. Okay, so shiitake mushroom, chop. Yeah, shiitake mushroom definitely smells very strong. Use with care. hear whistling outside. Guess the upstairs neighbor came back home. Sounds like he's in a good mood. Yeah, our upstairs neighbors got tested for coronavirus to see if they got it, and neither one of them tested positive, which is great news for everybody. So that means our 2-unit condo is coronavirus free for the most part. All right, so that's one mushroom. That's a lot of mushrooms. Yeah, these shiitake mushrooms are huge. I'll do one more. It's farting. All right. Ugh. It makes this like squelchy sound. Yeah, this knife definitely can use a little extra sharpening. I sharpened it maybe a month ago. Now it's a little dull again. Switch to my other knife that's a little bit more sharp. This one I sharpened more recently. That's a little better. That's 2 mushrooms. Heck, let's make it 3. Yeah, this knife is so much sharper. Whew. Sharp knife is so important. Okey-doke. Definitely a weekend day kind of dish. Oh, I feel bad doing that. Okay, I'm gonna do that with a cheap knife. Not cheap, but the not so sharp knife. In Chinese, this step is called duo. I suspect it's an onomatopoeia. Because I'm going do 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 do. All right. Okay, so that's mushrooms. Man, I have this old thing. It's like literally a fresh mushroom that went dry. didn't go bad, it just doesn't look great. All right. All right, so that's about it. So mushroom, everything. Okay, so meat. All right, how much meat? Let's find out. How much meat did I get? So I got some ground pork because I have still some leftovers from yesterday. So pork is where I sort of measure, as long as it's around a pound. A little bit more, a little bit less, doesn't really matter. But you need about a pound of pork. And the pre-made ground pork tends to be pretty good because they usually ground the parts that are like a little fattier. Oh, okay, I guess I have way more pork than I thought I did. Okay. That's like, in this case, 571 grams. That's quite a bit of pork, actually. Well, so I use the pre-made ground pork because they usually are just a little bit fattier, and fattier pork tastes better in this dish. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and engage in a very important step, which is stirring the water into the pork. So I'm going to break it apart a little bit. And I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit of shrimp water. So this is a Napa cabbage version. So you add a little bit more salt than soy sauce. So you can eat both. So this is how much salt that I'm adding. Maybe a little bit more than that, because you have to think later on you're gonna need that Napa cabbage. And most of that salt right now that what I'm adding is going to support all this Napa cabbage. Oh, so much Napa cabbage. So it's gonna support quite a bit of Napa cabbage to integrate flavor into it. So I kind of like over salt the pork a little bit. So mostly salt. And so I never know how much salt to put in because it's just sort of a guesstimate. So usually I add a little bit of salt and a little bit of soy sauce, not much. You want to use less soy sauce than salt, basically. A little more. Yesterday when I made it, I feel like it was not very salty, so I had to add a little bit more salt. So today I maybe, all right, just a touch more for good luck. If the pork is really old, you want to add a little bit of cooking wine, but this is fairly fresh, so it doesn't need cooking wine. Yeah, how's it going? I'm making a video to explain how to make this. All right, so put in all the stuff, and then You put in the green onion, ginger water. So I'm gonna go ahead. So this is the important part. You need to stir and stir and keep stirring until all the water gets integrated into the pork. So you also don't want to change the direction of your stirring. You'll only want to stir in one direction. And you see why soon. Because what'll happen is eventually all the muscle fiber and fat in the meat kind of becomes integrated with the liquid when you have enough liquid in there. All the fat. So sometimes I would grind bacon into this. In fact, I bought some bacon today. I thought I was gonna grind some bacon into this, but too much trouble. Just gonna stick with this. And then just add a little bit more liquid in there. So see how the meat is kind of like swallowing the liquid a little bit. You want to add a little bit at a time. Quite a bit of back pain here. I can smell it. Doesn't smell too salty. When it's salty, you can smell the salt in the meat. It will smell correct. So I think this is actually probably okay. We'll see. Let's get all the rest of that flavor in there. Ah, heck. Too lazy. This might be too much water. Oops. We'll see. The curse of the person that's super impatient. I'm not a very patient cook. So every time I mess up, it's because I was being impatient and stupid about something. Okay, this is not too bad. So see how it's like developing this almost like jam-like texture. Oh man, so much stirring. Need 2 more chopsticks. There you go. A little bit more leverage. A little bit more. Oh, my back hurts. My shoulder hurts. Everything hurts. I need to work out more. Okay. This is about okay. It gets stickier and stickier as you go. And the liquid just kind of integrates into the meat. So that's the consistency. It's like very sticky. That's why you see like people making dumplings and the filling is so sticky is because of the step. This actually smells pretty good. And then I'm gonna go boop. Shrimp, mushroom, all that good stuff. All right, that goes in. Keep stirring, integrating all the bits and pieces. Oh man, this is the part where I usually have Fritz help out. Yeah, if anybody knows if we can all skip this step, let me know. And I feel like this is something maybe the food processor would help. Like maybe the dough hook or something. But then again, I have to clean the food processor, which is in itself more work. Okay, so that's the meat combo. And I'm lazy. I'm just gonna put all the rest of the green onions in there because I don't want to make anything else with it. Let's see. Chinese chives. Hello, chives. Like I cut the chives and I just left it in the room, and I went out to get some extra groceries for this. And then when I came back, the entire house smells like chives. I had to cover it up. I think the house still smells like chives, but I can't tell anymore because it's been a couple hours. So that actually might end up being quite a bit of chives. So some of the dumplings have chives as kind of like the main ingredient, like the vegetable portion basically of the dumplings. And this is not the case with this dumpling. So you want to use chives as kind of the garnishing flavor rather than the driving force of the flavor. So you might notice that when I stir, I try to follow mostly the same direction. All right. Oof, that is one sticky filling. All right. So now after all this is basically ready to go, I'm gonna go ahead and chop up my cabbage. Be right back. This is a food processor. Makes quick work of this. Okay, so meat and veggies. About half and half. I feel like this is a lot of veggies though. And this is why you want to kind of do this towards the end, because the next step, my hands be a little bit more dry than that. Okay, so next step, I'm gonna take the veggies and I'm gonna try to wring out the water like that. Now I didn't do that yesterday for my filling, and in that particular case, my Napa cabbage was like a week and a half, 2 weeks old. It's really old. So it was already pretty dry to start out with, but it was still a little too liquidy. But then again, you don't want it to lose too much water throughout this process. It's like kind of becomes sort of dry crumbs. Different people have different approach with regarding to this step. Some people really want all the water to be wringed out, so they even like add salt to make the Napa cabbage spit out the water. But I think that makes the filling like too dry and doesn't taste great. I don't love it. So I actually do this toward the end. I try to get rid of some of the water, but still be able to save some. So you can see quite a bit of water comes out. Okay. Might be too much Napa cabbage, but we'll see. Let me actually combine the filling and see how it looks. I feel like it's quite a bit of Napa cabbage already. Yesterday I had this bowl full of Napa cabbage leaves that are cut up. So yeah, I would say about the same amount. Today I might have a touch more Napa cabbage. But then again, today I also have touch more meat. That means I have 2 little flour dough. Whoops. Now I think of it, the proportion might be a bit off. It's not gonna be a perfect mix. I should add a little bit of sesame oil right now. It's a very important ingredient, sesame oil. So, I'm gonna add that kind of toward the end. Let's see. See this? 100% sesame oil. So a lot of sesame oil that you get from the stores are actually not 100% sesame oil. It's mixed with other types of oils, like vegetable oil, whatever. So, and it doesn't taste or smell as good. 100% sesame oil is like really intense. Ooh, man, maybe too much sesame oil. Is there such thing as too much sesame oil? Definitely too much sesame oil. Ooh, that smells really strong. It's good though. It's a good smell. You might want to use less than I did. I feel like I added too much sesame oil. All right. This feels like just about the right amount of fillings. I don't want to waste all the Napa cabbage. Add more Napa cabbage. Just use it all up. See, this is the thing. It's like it's not really that exact of a science. It's just kind of about right. Is the amount. And I tend to like my dumplings not too greasy. Like a lot of recipes ask for extra oil. If your pork is fatty enough, you don't actually need the extra oil. So we'll find out when I made that first dumpling and taste test it. And that's the really important step, is that because it's not a set perfect recipe and I'm not that experienced with making these, oftentimes it's nice, instead of like sort of ruining the whole pot by the dumplings not being like salty enough or not tasting right, you know, you just make one first and taste it. And it's good, then you can proceed to make 100. I think this makes about 50, 45, 50 dumplings. Let's see. I have a feeling that this is not salty enough. So I'm gonna act on that and add a little bit more salt. Because I have a lot of Napa cabbage in there. You can smell the filling, and then you can get a sense of whether it's salty enough or not. I think that's actually a lot better. We'll make one and find out. Okay, so that's the filling. Did I miss anything? Nope, I think I got everything. Some people like adding a little bit of white pepper. That's also optional. But for the time being, I think this is good enough. And I'm gonna go ahead and make the dough. Okay, so by making the dough, I meant making the wrapper. But first I need to clean up. I don't know how all those internet videos are made, but I always find myself with a ton of random garbage and crap on the table. It's never clean. And on top of that, there's like a million dishes in the background that needs to be done first. So, gotta do that first. Okay. So, I have my cutting board. I want a very large working surface. And, probably not gonna use this one. Usually what I do here is I get like a nice giant cookie sheet and I line it with parchment paper first. And I put a ton of flour on it. This is really important because traditionally you have kind of like a surface that you put your dumpling on, and it's made of this like straws basically. It's a little bit of a straw mat, and it's very dry and it absorbs moisture and keeps the bottom of the dumplings relatively dry. They don't stick while you're making the dumplings. But this particular item, I suppose, doesn't exist in the kitchen here, and I can't find it anywhere because it's made of natural fibers. Like, it's made of basically this weird straw. It's like a straw mat basically. So I'm guessing that the importation of them may be somewhat restricted. So I've never seen them really anywhere, not in culinary stores either, not in Chinatown. I just haven't seen them. So, and the not so perfect replacement is this situation where you have basically parchment paper and you put something like a lot of flour on it and just basically keep the bottom dry by using flour to absorb the moisture. And you need to do that with a straw mat, you just need to do it less. So by doing this, you set up a surface for the dumplings to go to. The worst thing that can possibly happen is after all that work, the dumplings stick onto your surface that you're resting dumplings on while you're working, and then it breaks when you peel them off and it just becomes a mess. And it's really depressing and I don't want that to happen, so I'm gonna set this up. And I have like kind of a cookie, the cooling rack, and just for funsies, I want to kind of like put a couple on this one and see how this works. I literally just came up with this idea because I was looking at my oven and I was like, hey, you know what? Maybe this would work. Who knows? Probably won't. But I feel like this kind of gives a little bit more aeration on the bottom. So maybe it'll work better than the cookie sheet, or maybe it'll just be exactly the same. I'll put that on the side just in case. Do a little experiment and comparison. It's not as good as cookie sheet in terms of containing the flour though, so this might get messy. I'll put it on the side. Over here. Okay. So, dough. And I'm gonna do the peel again as I did before. Still very sticky, very moist. And this time, like after I kneaded it, it had a little bit more time to rest. So now it's really nice and everything's smooth and integrated. It's very sticky. Is it too sticky? Hopefully not. So yeah, this is a trial and error process. So if you've never made this before, I would highly recommend just making like half a cup of flour. You know, make like a little bit of dough and you get a sense of how soft and sticky you want your dough to be. Or hard for that matter. Like nice malleable dough makes it extremely easy to make the wrapping. Otherwise, the wrappers become like actually pretty difficult to make if the dough is not right. Let's give another round of kneading. Ooh. Don't waste any dough. Everything off the bottom. Okay, good enough. Oh my god. Look at this. Ew. Ew. It's stuck to my hand. Alright. So we're gonna have lots and lots of flour throughout the process. Here. The dough, so the flour keeps the dough from sticking to the board. And you might notice that I'm just kind of kneading and just like pulling and kneading, pulling and kneading, and it makes it kind of a circular shape. Keep it kind of like a nice circle, like that. And then I think people have dough dividers for a reason, but I don't have that. And I cleaned my knife that I used earlier. I think I'm gonna cut this into 4 pieces. That worked well yesterday, so. Okay, I think the dough divider is for a reason. All right, about 4 pieces. And then put the extra pieces back in the container here. They'll probably stick. Who cares? Good old saran wrap. Just wrap it all up. Stay nice and moist. All right. And then I have 1 piece. Okay. You want to make kind of like a donut in between, like this. An Ouroboros. Is that what it's called? The snake thing that eats itself. Okay. So, and then cut it open. I'm gonna do this. We'll find out if this ain't good. So cut and then rotate and cut and rotate and cut. This is important, otherwise your dough pieces are not gonna be nice and round. Rotate and cut. How big is each piece? Like this big. This might be kind of small, we'll find out. If I'm lazy, I make the pieces a little bit bigger, so I make really large dumplings. So, go here. And then you take this and you want to kind of do this thing where you kind of rotate your piece in the flour like that, and you flatten it into a nice circle. Plenty of flour to support this operation, otherwise it's gonna stick. Keep doing, keep going. Ugh, sticky. Keep going, keep going. How big are they each? I honestly don't know. I never weighed them. Let's weigh them. Science it. 18, 15, 16, 17. What's kind of a between 15 and 18 grams each? I would say I did a pretty good job dividing these. This one's small. This one's like a 15 gram. Let's find out. 15, 16. Ooh. This one also feels small. Maybe this one is also like a 15 to 16. Ooh, 15. This one's too small, I think. This one's like a 14. Yeah. Oh, man. All right. Let's add 2 more grams of flour to that. 2 grams of flour. Ooh. No. So like, maybe a little bit more. 15. All right. There you go. Perfect. Now, so each dough wrapper is like between 15 to 18 grams. I think these are actually pretty small. I would normally even make them bigger, so maybe even 20 grams per wrapper, but we'll find out. My trusty kneading pin. Okay, so this is technique. That's the important part. You want to take your kneading pin, there's plenty of flour on the bottom so it doesn't stick, plenty of flour on top, and then you knead, rotate, knead, rotate, knead, rotate, and rotate. And you want the center of the dough to be a little chubbier, like a little thicker, as you can see. It's like bulgy. And the edge to be very thin. So, yeah, these dough wrappers are little rotate. Okay, and then you keep going. The dough wrapper a little small. It's too much work to make tiny dumplings. I mean, the tiny dumplings, of course, look nicer, but I'm just by myself wrapping these, so too much work. So you start going, and then halfway in, rotate, rotate, and halfway in. So see, my finger kind of like helps me rotate the object or rotate the wrapper. So, and also helps me balance and figure out like where is the next stroke is gonna go. And then like these will actually kind of like shrink up a little bit after a little while. So sometimes before I wrap, I roll it again. But this wrapper think this is actually pretty successful. It's nice and soft. It's very easy to roll, to make the wrapper. So if it's not good, then this process will be much, much harder actually. Like your hand is gonna hurt at the end of it. But if it's soft, then it kind of gets spread out really easily. And the way that to ensure that is to, of course, the dough making process, like I mentioned before, kind of get the right amount of water in there, but also to have the dough rest. The longer it rests, the more evenly distributed the moisture is, and the easier for the dough to spread. You need the dough. So these are like pretty thick in the middle, actually. So when I wrap, I actually probably will give them a little bit more kneading and a little bit more TLC at the end there. But in general, you don't want the center of the dough to be too thin because your filling will leak if your center of the dough is too thin. So you actually want the center of the dough to be fairly thick. So that's why you only roll the edges. So, and then if you see me going kind of, I go to like about the center and I kind of loosen up the pressure a little bit towards the center too. I put more pressure when rolling the edges. I watch people cook on YouTube and I go like, oh, why is it that their dough comes out so easily, like when they, because I thought it's their technique. Turns out it's just the dough. It has nothing, I mean, it does have something to do with technique, but the technique is fairly easy to learn. It's just that if the dough is not the right consistency, it's actually much, much harder to make this wrapper. Do a little flour over there. Okay. Meanwhile, while this is going, I actually had some hot water boiling. I'm using a fairly small pot for this operation so that I can heat up the hot water quickly. And because I just need to make one dumpling and test it out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So 11, so that the whole batch is going to make like 44, something like that. So the water is already hot. I'll use a small tablespoon. So I have like a set of 2 size tablespoons. This is the smaller one. It's like a dessert spoon. Okay. Let's try. So the skillful chefs would be able to get a lot of meat into this. So what you want to do is you want to cradle your little dumpling, like cradle the meat, and you pinch the center and just kind of lightly pinch and seal off. So like this part, see how it's like too much meat? Not a big deal. Just lightly gather up and pinch. So now the whole thing is pinched together, and then what you want to do is you want to take this part of your hand and this part of your hand, okay, see, and then your hand is like this, so you cradle the dumpling and then pinch, and it'll seal the top nicely. So this is the fastest way and the most secure way the dumpling will seal. So it's just like pinch and seal. This only works if it's homemade wrapper though. It doesn't look great, but I'm not, for some reason I just don't make these look that great. So notice that when you pinch and seal, this part of your finger kind of cradles back. So it's like this, like that. And then it forms a triangle here. So pinch and seal. There you go. And that's one dumpling. So I'm gonna use that as a taste tester. So this is gonna go nicely on this much flour. See, it's like you want to make sure every dumpling rests on a ton of flour. Otherwise it's gonna stick on the bottom by the end of it. Okay, so I'm gonna keep going. I have a feeling this is gonna be okay. It probably doesn't need more salt. It might need a little bit of soy sauce. We'll see. Probably not. I'm gonna do the same thing. So that you can see why we want the center to be really thick, because when you do this, you're going to kind of like steal more flour from the center part. So seal, get together, gather, rest on this, and pinch. Have a little baby dumpling. So the better you get at wrapping, the more filling you can get into the wrapper. And that's ideal. So these are pretty floured on the bottom so they don't stick to each other, but you gotta work fast, otherwise the moisture is gonna be gone and it's gonna stick. Also, if you make bigger wrappers, it actually makes it probably easier to wrap because you have just more to work with. Ugh. So these are, yeah, 15-gram wrappers are too small, I think. It's like 18 grams probably. 18 to 20 is more ideal. Okay, so I made 4. I'm gonna taste test 4 of them. So I'm gonna go ahead and boil these. So the cooking of the dumplings has a bit of art to it. Okay, so you want water to be rolling boil. Ooh. Ow, ow, hot, 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 hot. That's not enough water, whatever. Probably a little bit more water would be ideal. And then, oh, totally scorched my hand. That was way hot. You want this to kind of agitate it a little bit so it doesn't stick on the bottom. So there's not enough water, so it's sticking. Okay, so you want to cook until it boils. Okay, this is like not enough water. Luckily I have a remedy here. My best friend! It's just hot water dispenser. Unlock. Dispense. Okay, yeah, you want to have plenty of hot water. There you go. Okay. All right, cool. And then this will cook until the dumplings float. So you want to leave it cooking for like maybe a couple minutes, 5 minutes, something like that. Maybe less than 5. So you just basically want to cook it until the dumplings starts to float on top. Right now they're kind of sinky. They'll like swell up a little bit and float on top. And then you need to put cold water in it. In Chinese, it's called 点水. So basically it means to put a bit of cold water in it so that the temperature goes down and then cooks back up, and then do it again and do it again. So you need to pour cold water to cool down and have it cook back up 3 times before they're ready. So unlike dumplings that you get from the supermarket, these have thicker skin and they're not cooked in the middle. So you'd have plenty of cold water. These are a little bit floatier. So right now we only have 2 dumplings, so it should be okay. So I'm gonna go ahead and pour like half a cup of cold water in there. And it's gonna go ahead and float on top, and you just wait for it to boil and do it again, and wait for it to boil and do it again. 3 times. All right, that's the 3rd time. These really swell up. So let's see how these taste. Oof, too hot, too hot. So this object is a must-have in Chinese cuisine. All right, we'll see if they're any good. Gonna reuse that water later on for cooking more dumplings, but in a bigger pot. All right, let's see. So this is a taste test. The inside looks pretty okay. Okay, that's definitely not bad. The wrappers turn out to be really good too. All right, little mukbang. Ooh, hot. That actually turned out to be just about the right amount of salt. I tend to have a pretty heavy palate, so if it's up to me, I'd probably even go with like more salt, but I think that'd be too much for your average person. I think this is actually just about right. The Chinese chives, oof. This is so much better than the yesterday's version because the Chinese chives. And that was not too much shrimp. I would even go with maybe more shrimp, or like if I were to put in, you know, those 6 more pieces of shrimp, it probably would have been fine. And actually, not too much cabbage either. It's a good idea that I didn't waste any of the Chinese cabbage. Turns out if you put more cabbage in, it doesn't make a difference. I actually like it with a little bit more cabbage. It just makes the dumpling feel more fresh. And you might notice I didn't put like much extra fat in it because the pork itself is already pretty fatty. And then I added a little bit of sesame oil, which not too much, just about the okay amount. So the sesame oil also provides another layer of taste and fattiness. I think I would, maybe a touch more soy sauce, just because I like it salty. And also, you can always adjust it by, you know, having dipping sauce as well. But if it's like a perfect dumpling, you don't even need dipping sauce. You can just eat it as is. But yeah, it just sort of to taste. The wrapper definitely worked out really well, and the filling is pretty good. I would say success. So that's just about, so like after you taste test it and feel like this is about the right amount, like make any minor adjustments, whatever. And then the next thing you can do is to cook the rest of it in a bigger pot. So what you want to do, I'm gonna go ahead and so what you want to do is use a much bigger pot. So there's lots of water to go around, and that you can keep adding water as you're cooking. So too hot? That's not too bad. Over here. Something here. I'm just gonna use my big ass wok. Ooh. And a little bit more water than that. Let's go ahead and fill up here. So the part where you add cold water as you're cooking, also it replenishes the water that's lost during cooking. All right, so that was like 4 times the amount of water, probably. I don't have a lid for this, which is unfortunate, because if you have a giant lid for this, which you should, but I just don't. If you have a giant lid for this, then this would cook a lot faster, but we have extra time to wrap the rest of the dumplings, so I'm just gonna leave it cooking. Like, this is the only lid I have that's really big, and it's barely enough to cover the amount of water, so maybe I'll just leave it there. And then this will boil, and then I'll go ahead and wrap the rest of the dumplings. All right, so this technical difficulties. All right, so there, droppers are not stuck together yet. Phew. Okay. I think my husband's back. This is gonna go on the internet.
Let me do where I am. Who this?
Nobody. I'm making a video instruction for how to make dumplings. So, and your excellent singing is gonna go on the internet. Okay, so I'm gonna make one more squeeze. And that pizza.
Maybe.
Oh.
It's a half-baked pizza.
Oh, a half-baked pizza.
Yeah, so we had to, when we're ready to eat it, we just bake it at 450.
Yeah, I guess another thing about these dumplings is that they freeze very well. So if your husband brings back home pizza, then you'll have to freeze your dumplings and eat them later.
So it's a Zachary's pizza.
Oh, nice.
Because I haven't had Zachary's in like a year and a half.
Yep. All right, so the skin's getting a little soggy because it's been resting for too long.
Also, my dad made tamales.
Oh wow, he made tamales?
Yeah, so I brought them back.
Oh damn. Oh.
We can steam them when we want.
All right. I should quickly finish making these, and I'll actually probably just freeze the rest of them today and not cook them all. Now I think of it, because there seems to be other food options that are a little bit more immediate. So these will freeze really well. And then once you freeze them, just basically, I usually just put them on like a plate and then put in the freezer. And then freeze them for maybe a couple hours and then pull them back out and put all the frozen ones in the plastic bag and then store. And once you've frozen them, to recook them, there's some tricks on that. I mean, basically to recook the dumplings when they're frozen, you want to, they actually work better as pot stickers rather than with water. So as pot stickers, these wrappers, these dumplings are, in general, they absorb a lot of moisture. So I just found a burnt pan because my husband was cooking these pot stickers in the morning and he didn't put enough water in it and the heat was too high. So these actually work slightly differently from grocery store bought dumplings that are frozen, because the grocery store bought dumplings don't absorb that much moisture. These will eat up and drink up moisture. So what you need to do is you need to make sure that you don't use too much, make sure you don't use heat that's too high, so it gives the dumpling a little bit of time to absorb the moisture and cook. And you also want to make sure that you add enough water, a little bit more than you would cook pot stickers from a frozen dumpling place that you get, or from the frozen dumpling they get from the supermarket. So generally speaking, like this, you would actually add a little bit more water, cook on like medium heat until the water effectively cooks the dumpling through, and then open up the lid and let the rest of the water evaporate and then becomes pot stickers on the bottom. So that's pretty much it. You can reboil these after they've been frozen. If you want to make boiled dumplings, I think I read somewhere on the internet, I haven't really tried this myself, that the way to make boiled dumplings is to not heat the water to a rolling boil, but heat the water to maybe like a 80-90% hot, and then put the dumplings, frozen dumplings, in, so that the dumplings will heat up with water. Otherwise, if it's frozen dumpling, super hot water, then the dumpling will break. But I haven't tested it out, so maybe I'll test it out later and let you know how that method works. Meanwhile, I guess I don't need to boil water over there. Just gonna freeze the rest of this. Oh, first you want to taste test the dumpling? I made 2.
Oh my god. Mantises are back.
Oh.
Work at mantises.
Animal Crossing.
Yeah. There's always new butterflies.
I know, right?
Your flower
Spring
field
is nice.
Hella advanced.
Hybrid flowers. Okay.
You say taste test? Is there one ready?
Yeah, over there. Try it. That's about it. That's how you make these dumplings. Easy peasy.